Hello. So today's guest on the show is Harsh Mohta, and we are time zones apart. He's in Amsterdam. I'm in Calcutta, and I know him since long. First, during our MBA internship, I met his father in Hong Kong when he was at Philips. So unfortunately, sir is no more. And then he had done his articleship in CA from Deloitte. So that's where we had interacted quite a bit. And now he's in Amsterdam. It's a CA and an MBA from Cambridge, and a very good career in FP&A, for which I thought that there'll be youngsters for whom this could be an inspiring story. So, welcome to the show, Harsh. Maybe
Thanks for
a
having me.
quick context setting in terms of the podcast. This podcast is viewed by people in the age group of 18 to 25 and then 25 to 45 who seek to build a career in commerce. So, majority of the people who will be watching your podcast will be looking in terms of what are the takeaways, what they can do in terms of their career, etc. So I'll start with requesting you to just share a bit about your journey, and then we'll take specific questions.
Yeah, sounds good. And thanks for having me, Anurag. Always a pleasure. Yeah, so for me, like you summarized, right? I did my CA and I did my MBA from the University of Cambridge. So started off CA, typically how you do a classic story. You do commerce. It CA is sort of the most lucrative option at that point. That at least back when I was doing it. So anyone who has a vague idea of finance or commerce starts to go into CA, which is what I ended up doing, whilst also simultaneously doing my college at Xavier's Calcutta. So did that in parallel and did another thing in parallel, the articleship with Deloitte. Once I got done with that and once I qualified, I moved to Mumbai to do due diligence with EY's national practice. And what is only something I can describe as a very calculated leap of faith. I did 2.5 years of that, and then I went to get my MBA. So I knew that I wanted to get an MBA from a European or a UK college, just because of the diversity, not just in terms of nationality, but also people coming from different walks of life. So took that leap of faith, went to do my MBA, and since then, since the MBA, I've been here in Amsterdam now for just under 5 years. You know, having done that MBA opened that door for me to go into Europe, and here I've stumbled onto FP&A, commercial finance, business partnering, and this is where things have really got interesting for me. Today, I'm at a company called Here Technologies, which is a market leader in global mapping and locational intelligence. For me, if I have to find a really common thread across everything that I do, is that I started in Big Four, which is very, I call it school after school because it's an incredible training ground. But at some point, you're just looking at businesses from the outside in. But when you're an FPA, when you're doing business partnering with key leaders, when you're doing commercial finance, you're actually helping shape the future of the company. And for me, that shift from observer to participant is something I realized I've been chasing for a long time.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So
Okay.
you've taken the path which is traditional audit, then transactions, then moved to proper FP&A roles. Now here, would you have some thoughts around, the typical way the society imposes certain roles on a chartered accountant vis-a-vis the ones who then say that, boss, we do not want to fit into the stereotypes, and what are the action steps that they take, and then how does the journey therefore shift? So it's a question around the traditional versus non-traditional, the roles which society imposes on you vis-a-vis the ones which you want to take. So something like that.
Actually, that's a very interesting way to put it, right? Because there is definitely some sort of imposition. Because for me, I don't believe with respect to CS, right? I never believe it's an ability problem. It's always a visibility problem. Because, like you said, like a mental map is gets drawn very early. Like if you start your articleship, it's mostly audit or tax, so on and so forth. The people that you look up to when you're doing the CA are probably partners at Big Four, the alumni or your who come to talk to you either in tax or FTD. back when I was doing my CA, FTD was sort of the quote unquote sexy thing at that point. Everyone was gravitating towards that. So when you're 21 and you're really trying to figure out how your career starts, you just default to what you see. It's like, someone drew a map of the city, but they just drew two roads on it. There's so many more roads that exist, but it's just not there visible to you, so you just don't know about it. I mean, now where I am today, I know, you know, someone who's a CA can go into FP&A, into commercial finance, business partnering, corporate strategy, treasury. There's no end to the number of roads on that map, right? It's just that you don't know about it at the very onset. But having said that, like, for me, Big Four isn't a bad place to start. It's actually an excellent place to start because it really is a boot camp. It really is a lot of my sort of core competency, technical knowledge, Excel capabilities, all of that, and including on the soft skill side, sort of discipline, massive exposure, all of that comes from doing the Big Four. So I think in terms of lineage, I I I always recommend even people who ask me, like, start with Big Four, but then very quickly find out what are your transferable skills and where do you actually want to end up being.
I see. That's interesting. Now, for the uninitiated, someone who's just in college doing CA, and they've done only audit. What is financial planning and analysis, FP&A as we call it? So, how did you discover FP&A? How different it is? What are the skills that are required?
So maybe I'll give you an analogy, right? Think of it this way: if your business is a cricket team, the
Okay.
the accounting team are the scorekeepers, or the people who actually keep the tally of the runs. They record what's happening accurately on the books. FP&A, on the other hand, are the people who sit in the dugouts. They're going to be the ones who tap the captain on the shoulder and say, if you're going at this run rate, you're going to be, say, 30 runs short. Here's why. This is the next 1, 2, 3 things that you should do. This is the person you should send next. These are the actionable things you can do to make sure that there is a course correction of sorts. So to me, that's the simplest analogy I can give, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay.
technically, I think FP&A sort of stands for financial planning and analysis. Some of the key things that you do is, you build the annual budget, annual operating plan. Every company has a different nomenclature for it. You do on a month to month, a quarter to quarter basis. You compare actual performance of the company vis-a-vis what you initially planned for. Then, because of that, how you need to reforecast or change your forecast to reflect the most likely or ending landing point of the company. You you find out you sort of find out signals of what's happening and have actionable recommendations to leadership, to management, to course correct. So, and lastly, you're very critical, sitting very close to business leaders, helping them make better decisions in a nutshell, finance sort of moving forward to business.
Interesting. So now I will ask you about the transition. So when you moved from FDD to commercial finance at EVBox, that's a big shift. There was no playbook, frameworks that have been built from scratch. So were you nervous on day one? And then what did your week one actually feel like? Then how did you really warm up to the role and make your impact?
But honestly, I sort of completely stumbled onto this role, right? And like I said at the beginning, I didn't know what commercial finance was before I went into it. It was just, for me, EV charging as a industry was something I was very passionate about, because I'm very passionate about the intersection of sustainability and finance. And for me, getting getting an opportunity in a finance function in an EV charging was very lucrative. So at that point, I said, okay, I went through the job description, I went through the requirements that they had, and I discovered that there's a lot of transferable skills, specifically on the analytical rigor, on the understanding, the predictive forecasting sort of things. I said, okay, there's a lot of transferable skills. Let me take another leap of faith, and then let's go into it. when I
Ah,
what I did not realize was, not only was it a change in, being at a Big Four versus being at a corporate, but also in terms of the size, it was a completely different playing field because EVBox at that point was in a classic scale-up phase. So the commercial part of the business or the revenue, the business side of it had suddenly had this incredibly steep growth, and the support and the enabling functions were still trying to play catch up. So when I came in, there were so many things that there were multiple different ERPs, multiple different data sets, all fragmented. Not everything speaks to one another. So, and coming from Big Four, right? Clients who can afford Big Fours are typically much further into their finance maturation. So they have built SOPs, they have all data sets that speak to each other, ERP, everything. So for me, that was a very big cultural shock. Where I came in and I said, I don't understand how data sets can't speak to each other. I don't understand why the number in source A is different than number in source B. Where's the single source of truth? So trying to work in that landscape and trying to make sure that finance can catch up to where the business was at that stage, for me, that paradigm shift was incredibly difficult, but in hindsight, an incredible learning experience.
Okay. Now I'll come to one specific question about the UK MBA. So what difference did this Cambridge MBA do? So Harsh with the CA, Big Four, FDD at EY, vis-a-vis Harsh with all of this and the MBA, how differently did the world perceive you once you had done this MBA?
So I think first and foremost, right, and then I'm gonna be, and I swear I don't mean to sound elitist when I say this, right? But the Cambridge brand name carries a lot of value, and it does come with a sense of that oh, this person is from here. So there's already a perceived set of preconceived set of expectations. So I'm definitely, I'm not going to deny that. But I think for me deciding to do an MBA was so that I could work on skills that I needed to develop beyond the CA. I think CA teaches you substantial amount of, like, the learning potential in CA and sort of the analytical rigor, the understanding of accounting, finance, everything is incredible. You will never learn anything. You don't need to learn anything more than that from finance perspective. But what the CA doesn't prepare you for. So for me, number one was storytelling, right? Because I can make the most incredible data analysis, everything that makes complete sense in terms of where the business is, what the business needs to go to, what are the pain points. But if I cannot be clear and persuasive in communicating that to the actual decision makers, then that's a moot point, because a 20-page variance analysis with every line having sort of a perfect answer is not going to be enough, because a CFO just wants three bullet points. They just want to understand, what do I need to do A, B, and C, and what would that imply? So being able to translate all of the numbers into a credible narrative, I mean, that was number one. Number two was stakeholder management. And for me, that's why a European or UK MBA is very important, because the cohort there, people come from completely different walks of life. I have interacted with people in my MBA who had pre-MBA careers I did not know existed. Like whether it was someone who was in insurance, kidnapping ransom insurance, or someone was an auctioneer, someone was a private art collector. So it completely different walks of life. So to be able to get their perspective, get their viewpoints, and sort of have that understanding of how I can partner with finance for non-finance. I think for me that was another very important. And third was just genuine business curiosity, right? Because some of the best FP&A people I've worked with are not just financially literate or financially very strong, but they're just obsessed with trying to figure out how business actually makes money. How can we make more money? How can we make sure that there's a sustainable earnings level? Why does this customer segment churn so much? What is the driving factor? How can we improve gross margin by 2 points? So that curiosity isn't necessarily tested in the CA.
Understood. Logical. Coming to life in Amsterdam, how is it different culturally? How are Indians perceived there? If you could shed some numbers around, what is kind of earning levels that is there in terms of potential to save? Is it higher than India? Or as some people tell me that, typically your savings will be the same, but you end up living a better life. So how exactly would the cookie crumble in terms of your net takeaways from the job?
I'm gonna peel that question in layers, right? Because that's quite a loaded question, I think.
So
In
one is
terms of
culture and one is the numbers in terms of take home and net savings.
so I think culture is quite is quite different, right? And I think for me the biggest sort of call it culture shock or under appreciation of different cultures was in Europe or in the Netherlands in particular, it's a very flat hierarchy. So I can speak to people 2 or 3 levels above me, and I can genuinely sort of spar with them in meetings and try to, if they've said, it's not that if they've said something, I'm gonna take that as gospel and I'm just gonna do it. I have the flexibility, I have the openness, and there's a receptiveness from the other person, regardless of the seniority level, to hear my thoughts, call them out if something doesn't make sense or if I believe that the data doesn't support what they're saying. So for me, that level of openness and that level of open dialogue, I think was a very big thing. And I worked very junior levels in India before I decided to move out, but at that point, I didn't feel that same level of openness or receptiveness to hear a junior's point of view when I was in India. So for me, that was one of the biggest one, and that sort of comes a little bit from how a typical Dutch culture is, where and it's quite famously told that Dutch are some of the most direct people. So the good part of that is they're going to tell you as it is, and they're not going to sort of talk something in front of your face and talk something behind. But on the flip side, sometimes it can come across as rude, but they don't mean to be rude. They're just going to be very direct. They're not going to have multiple layers of sugarcoating or politeness wrapped around the actual crux of the matter. So I think that sort of defines a little bit of the work culture as well. In terms of and the other thing is I think the work-life boundary is a very genuine structural thing, and it's not just a cultural preference. In a very, for example, Dutch denominated company or workplace, 5 p.m. is 5 p.m. and they're gonna leave at 5 p.m. In some of the more sort of multinational companies, of course that stretches a little bit, but it's not gonna be you're gonna be working till 10 every day. There people
Uh,
take 3 weeks, 3.5, up to 5 weeks off in summer to go and take a holiday with their family.
hmm.
And people take 1 week off in April to go skiing. So these are almost non-negotiables in a person's calendar here. Which I know the struggle of trying to get a very long holiday in India. I've gone through that pain of trying to convince the managers and the partners that like I need to go for 2 weeks. And here it's just so that's for me another very big area of difference. I think in terms of salary levels, the I would say PPP Netherlands is about 3x, 3.5x of what you would have relative to an Indian spending pattern, and it depends a little bit on what field you're in that determines how much you make, right? Much like anywhere else in the world. I think typically in FP&A, uh, the base salary is good, but the sort of bigger pieces of the pie are, a lot of companies are going to give you performance-based bonuses. A lot of companies are going to give you stock options, especially if you're doing FP&A or finance in tech. That's a very common thing, and that sort of is really the kicker, really the sweetener that adds up quite a bit. I would say me personally, and I compare to my Indian friend, to my friends still in India or at similar levels. I think there's an incredible amount of savings potential. It's about how you dictate your life, how you dictate what you do, and but I think that there's very good. It's very financially lucrative. I'll put it that way.
Understood. 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 Logical. Now I'll come to some questions around, like any embarrassing thing that happened to you for the first year in Amsterdam.
Uh, yeah, I mean, it again goes back to how Dutch people are very sort of very not diplomatic at all, very direct, right? I've been in, I think one of my first interactions. That person very upfront. He told me on the first day. He said, "I am very Dutch and I'm very direct." Okay, and at that point, I didn't really understand what that meant, right? Other than just hearing about Dutch people are very direct. And then I walked into a review with him a few weeks later on a project we were working together. And I walked in very intricate, very detailed slide in Excel. I was very proud of it. He looked at it for 10 seconds, like, I think this is correct, but I don't understand it. Redo it again. And he just walked off. There was no further explanation, no elaboration, no, oh, that was a good try. Maybe do A, B, or C. No, nothing like that. It was just, that's where the conversation ended. And for me, I was somewhere between offended and deeply impressed at the same time, if that's even possible. Because that 10-second interaction taught me that communicating finance is more than just 3 years of formal training, 5 years of formal training that you do. It is, I can, like I said, I can make anything very intricate, but it's about how I can present something very easily. It's understandable. But I was very taken aback when that happened. Okay.
In the Cambridge MBA, and it also happens to a lot of me when a lot of us, like when I had gone to IIM Ahmedabad, sometimes you have very high perceptions about yourself, being a rank holder, CA, worked with Big Four and all, and then suddenly you feel that you don't belong to that room. Did that moment ever happen to you?
Absolutely. I think for me, MBA was definitely a very humbling experience. And I think that imposter syndrome is absolutely real. Like when I remember we flew into Cambridge and it was during a COVID year. So I had to quarantine the moment I came there. So at 14 days, I was just in my room. And I was like, okay, let me look at the class profile. Let me look at everyone on LinkedIn. And then I kept just 180 odd people. I don't think I searched 180, but I kept putting certain names on LinkedIn. I'm like, oh, this person's done this, this, and this. Oh, okay, this person went to here. This person was a VP here. This person did, and those 14 days of just me being myself and looking all of that, I was like, maybe they made a mistake. Maybe this is not the room I belong in. But I think that's a very natural feeling that happens. And I think once and everyone in the MBA has their guards up at least. And within the first 1 week, you become so familiar with each other, all the guards are down, and then you're just in a much more relaxed environment. You're like, yeah, I think this makes sense. I think we're all on the same boat. For me, that was one, and the other one was I think we were in and I forget what class. We were in a class, and the professor asked a question, and me being me, I was like, oh, I know the answer, and I raised my hand. I said the answer. Great. And then I heard someone else say a completely different answer, but then as I played it back in my head, it was also right. And then a third person said something, and that also made a lot of sense. And for me, that realization that just because I am right, that doesn't mean someone else is wrong, because there can be multiple different perspectives and points of views, which someone who did CA and was surrounded almost entirely by finance, similar aged finance folks the entire time, for me, that level of light bulb moment was very inspiring and very humbling.
Fantastic. My final two questions. You worked with, let's say, a KKR, Blackstone, Tata Group, so you touched upon multiple things as part of your career. A young CA from Kolkata, did you ever pinch yourself that, hey, Harsh, is it really me who is been in these big places? क्या चल रहा है या magic है, dream है?
I think that happens even now, to be honest. There are often times where I look and I'm like, okay, I think I made it. I I knew I always had very high aspirations for myself as where I wanted to be, but actually seeing it play out, it's a really rewarding sort of experience. Like, oh wow, okay, I did it. Yes, I'm here. I did all of this. I think it's definitely it feels very nice to have a look back. And sometimes, you know, I get those photos on like Instagram memories or iPhone memories, and like, oh, this was me 6 years ago or 8 years ago, 10 years ago. This is where I was. This is what my life was at that point. And then that's your automatic reference point, and then you realize you've come quite a decent way. There's more to go, but you've come quite a bit of a decent way.
Now, you said
Yeah,
you were very ambitious. Did you inherit it from Deepak, sir? And
yeah,
how did being a second generation, having such a successful father, uh, shape your journey in a way?
absolutely. Because I mean, he did his CA, CS, costing. He was rank holder in all of them. So for me, that was my immediate role model. He was my immediate role model in terms of what he had achieved and the kind of life that he was able to give my family and me. So for me, that was a very, very direct inspiration and my first role model in terms of, okay, he's done it this way and this is the path he followed. Let me just follow that same path.
Fantastic. I'm very inspired. I've been very inspired by your father ever since I met him in Hong Kong. Now inspired by your journey. Any final couple of lines that you would have for viewers on this channel?
I think just because sort of you said that, you know, that the age bucket that watch these podcasts and listen to these podcasts are sort of newer early career professionals. So I just want to leave them with a few drops of wisdom from my side, unsolicited wisdom from my side, where I 10 years of having worked now, for me, what I've realized, the CA qualification is not a destination. It's a boarding pass. What you do with it, where you fly with it, that's the actual journey. And a lot of people underestimate themselves. They only know the, like I said, the very narrow lanes that are drawn to them, that are shown to them. But the CA teaches you incredible rigor, resilience, analytical sharpness, and they're generally far more valuable than what someone would have told you about it. There's there's the world is your canvas in terms of where you want to go, in terms of what you want to do. Just be curious, be willing to look stupid, ask stupid questions. Chances are a lot of people are thinking the same thing, just not asking it. Try to be in rooms where you don't think you belong. That's where you're gonna learn the most. And don't confuse the map you were given with. That territory actually exists. That territory is just much bigger.
Thank you so much, Harsh, for sparing time out for this podcast.
Of
Love to
course.
hear your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.